Earth burned. The skies, once a canvas of endless blue, were now choked with the acrid smoke of cities reduced to embers. Alien warships hovered like carrion birds, their metallic hulls gleaming as they cast long, merciless shadows over the ruins of human civilization. The war had not been a war, it had been a slaughter. The Xerac Empire had not come seeking conquest or diplomacy. They had come with a singular purpose, annihilation. And humanity, fractured and unprepared, had crumbled beneath their unrelenting advance. Darius Cole had watched the world die. He had been a soldier for most of his life, fighting human wars, bleeding for causes that now felt like distant echoes. He had believed in the might of Earth's forces, in their ability to defend their home. That belief had been shattered within the first 3 days of the invasion. Entire battalions were erased from existence before they could mount a defense. The Xerac's weapons were unlike anything humanity had ever faced, pulses of energy that disintegrated flesh and steel alike, drones that hunted survivors with cold precision, armor that shrugged off Earth's most powerful artillery. The war had been lost before it had even begun. Now, months later, Darius moved like a ghost through the wreckage of what had once been New York. The towering skyscrapers, symbols of human ambition, lay in jagged heaps, their steel frames twisted and broken. He tightened his grip on his rifle, a modified weapon salvaged from a fallen Xerac patrol. Ammunition was scarce, but necessity had bred ingenuity. Humanity had learned to fight with whatever they could scavenge. A low voice crackled through his earpiece. "Cole, you see them?" Darius crouched behind the wreckage of a collapsed building, peering through the jagged opening. In the distance, a group of Xerac soldiers moved with the ease of predators that had long since stopped fearing their prey. Their elongated forms were covered in segmented armor, their eyes a featureless black that reflected no light, no soul. They carried plasma rifles, weapons capable of turning a man into ash in the blink of an eye. "I see them," Darius murmured. 5-man patrol, the voice on the other end confirmed. It belonged to Kane, one of the few soldiers left from what had once been Earth's proudest Special Forces unit. "They're getting too comfortable. Time to remind them that we're still here." Darius exhaled slowly. The Xerac thought the war was over, that humanity had accepted its fate. That was their first mistake. Moving like a shadow, he signaled to the others hidden in the debris. Ortega, their sniper, was positioned atop the ruins of an old government building, his rifle aimed and waiting. Rourke, their tech specialist, crouched beside a stolen Xerac drone, rewiring its systems to turn it against its former masters. Darius took the first shot. The plasma rifle hummed as it fired, sending a bolt of energy straight into the nearest Xerac's throat. The alien staggered, its guttural shriek cut short as it collapsed. The others reacted with inhuman speed, their weapons swinging toward the source of the attack, but Ortega was faster. His shot punched through the skull of the second alien, sending it sprawling into the dirt. Chaos erupted. Kane and the others broke from cover, opening fire with scavenged rifles and stolen explosives. The Xerac fought back, their plasma rounds scorching the air, but humans had learned to adapt. They moved unpredictably, striking from multiple angles, forcing the enemy into a desperate retreat. The last alien tried to flee, its elongated limbs propelling it forward with unnatural speed. Darius was on it before it could escape, tackling it to the ground. He drove his knife into the gap between its armor plates, twisting until the creature convulsed and fell still. Silence settled over the battlefield, broken only by the crackling of distant fires and the labored breathing of survivors. Darius wiped the alien blood from his blade, his expression grim. "We need to move," Kane said, scanning the ruins for any sign of reinforcements. "That patrol won't go unmissed." "They think we're weak," Ortega muttered, reloading his rifle. "They think we're beaten." Darius stared down at the lifeless bodies of the Xerac soldiers. Months ago, humanity had been caught off guard, divided and overwhelmed. But something had changed. The survivors were no longer just running, no longer just hiding. They were learning. They were adapting. He looked at his team, at the hardened faces of men who had lost everything yet refused to bow. The Zirak had underestimated them. They had mistaken mercy for weakness, survival for surrender. That mistake would cost them everything. Darius adjusted his rifle, stepping over the corpses as he led his men deeper into the ruins. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning.
The cold bit deep, cutting through layers of scavenged gear as the men moved through the skeletal remains of what had once been an industrial complex. Darius Cole adjusted the strap of his rifle, scanning the shadows with the precision of a predator that had learned to survive in a world where death lurked in every corner. The Zirak had all but wiped out Earth's formal military, leaving behind scattered survivors, remnants of once proud divisions. Those who remained had learned quickly that survival was a privilege earned only through adaptation. Kane moved beside him, silent as always, his sharp eyes sweeping across the ruins with practiced efficiency. Ortega followed, rifle held loose but ready, the steady presence of a man who had spent a lifetime calculating angles and wind resistance before pulling a trigger. Rourke brought up the rear, the hum of stolen alien tech barely audible beneath his breath as he whispered obscenities at the salvaged drone he was attempting to reprogram. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense anymore. They were something else, something the Zirak had never expected. The path led to an old storage depot, one of the few structures that hadn't been completely reduced to rubble. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of rust and oil, mingled with the ever-present bite of cold. A small fire flickered in the center of the room, casting elongated shadows over the faces of the men gathered there. Survivors. Fighters. Some were former military, others were just civilians who had learned how to kill. Darius stepped forward, his voice low but carrying the weight of command. The Zirak think we're done. They think we're scattered, broken. They're wrong. He let the silence stretch, meeting the eyes of each man in turn. We've been playing defense, picking off their patrols, scavenging what we can. That ends now. We aren't just survivors. We're soldiers. And it's time we started acting like it. A murmur ran through the group. Some nodded, their expressions hardened by months of loss and war. Others remained silent, watching, waiting. Kane leaned against a rusted crate, arms crossed. We've got intel on a supply convoy moving through Sector 12. Weapons, ammunition, medical supplies. Everything we need to start hitting back harder. He paused, letting the information sink in. But it won't be easy. They've got armor support, drone escorts, and ground troops. If we hit them, we have to hit them fast. Hard. No second chances. Darius studied the group. Their numbers had grown, but numbers meant nothing without skill. We need to train. We need to move like an army again. No more scavenger tactics. No more running. We take this fight to them. Ortega smirked, rolling his shoulders. About time. The next 3 days were spent forging the chaos of survivors into something more. Old habits had to be broken. Civilians learned the brutal efficiency of military discipline, while former soldiers unlearned outdated tactics that had proven useless against the Zirak. Speed replaced hesitation. Precision replaced desperation. The enemy was stronger, faster, technologically superior, but they weren't invincible. And that was the lesson drilled into every man standing in the frozen ruins of their training ground. Ortega worked with the marksmen, refining their accuracy with scavenged rifles and stolen alien weapons. Kane took point on close-quarters combat, drilling squads in ambush tactics, knife work, and improvised explosives. Rourke turned salvage technology into tools of war, hacking Zirak systems, overriding drone controls, and repurposing alien communications. Darius moved through it all, watching, correcting, pushing them beyond what they thought they could endure. They were no longer fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. The first test came sooner than expected. A Zirak scout team had picked up traces of human activity near the depot. A 6-man patrol, accompanied by 2 aerial drones, moved through the ruins, searching for signs of resistance. The old way would have been to hide, to wait for them to pass. But this wasn't the old way. Darius signaled to his men, and they moved with lethal precision. Ortega's rifle whispered in the cold, dropping the lead alien before the others could react. Kane and his squad struck from the shadows, knives flashing as they took down the next two before their weapons could be raised. The last three turned to fight, but it was already over. A stolen Zirac drone, now under Rourke's control, turned on its former masters, cutting them down with merciless efficiency. When the dust settled, there were no human casualties. No wasted ammunition. No reckless brawling. Just silence and the bodies of the enemy. Darius crouched beside the fallen Zirac, inspecting the corpse with a cold, analytical eye. They weren't expecting that. Kane wiped his blade clean. They will now. Ortega slung his rifle over his shoulder, grinning. Good. Let 'em know what's coming. The next morning, they moved toward Sector 12, a force no longer just surviving, but hunting. The soldiers of vengeance had been forged, and the war was far from over.
The wind howled through the ruins, carrying with it the scent of metal, fire, and something darker, something human. The convoy was late. Darius crouched behind a shattered wall, his gloved fingers tightening around his rifle. The cold had long since become a dull ache in his bones, ignored in favor of the tension coiling in his muscles. Across from him, Kane signaled, a quick, sharp motion of his fingers. Eyes up, movement. The Zirac convoy came into view through the swirling snow. Sleek, black-armored transports rumbled forward, their repulsors kicking up loose ice and debris. Flanking them, a squad of alien soldiers moved in perfect formation, their rifles held with the ease of practice killers. A drone hovered above, its red optics scanning the ruins for threats. Darius exhaled slowly. This was the moment they had prepared for. Ortega's voice crackled in his earpiece. Clear shot on the drone. Take it. A sharp crack split the air. The drone spiraled, sparks trailing from its ruptured casing before it crashed into the snow. The Zirac soldiers reacted, instantly raising weapons, scanning for the source of the attack. But they were looking in the wrong direction. A second shot. One of the soldiers jerked, a mist of dark blood spraying the air. The others snapped into defensive positions, barking commands in their guttural language. Too slow. Kane and his squad emerged from the ruins like wraiths, silent and efficient, cutting down two more before the Zirac had a chance to fire back. Then the world erupted into chaos. Darius surged forward, his boots crunching against the ice as he fired. His rounds struck true, punching through alien armor with stolen Zirac ammunition. The enemy responded with hissing plasma fire, streaks of green lancing through the snowfall. One shot slammed into the wall behind him, sending molten rock and ice spraying in all directions. To his right, Ortega fired methodically, picking off soldiers with a sniper's patience. Kane had closed the distance, his blade flashing as he carved through the armored throat of an enemy soldier. Rourke was already at the nearest transport, his hands a blur as he hacked into the control panel. The Zirac fought hard. They always did. One of them, taller than the rest, barked an order before charging forward, its energy blade igniting in a crackling arc Darius barely dodged in time, rolling through the snow as the blade slashed inches from his face. He came up firing. The first shot hit armor. The second found flesh. The alien staggered, snarling, before Kane was there, finishing it with a precise stab through the skull. More enemy troops poured from the second transport, their weapons spitting fire. The resistance fighters took cover, returning fire in short, disciplined bursts. Ortega's rifle clicked dry. He cursed, drawing his sidearm and putting a round through the visor of a charging Zirac. Rourke let out a victorious shout. I'm in. The transport's doors hissed open. Darius didn't hesitate. Move. Now. They poured inside, taking down the last of the Zirac as they went. The interior was filled with crates, ammunition, explosives, medical supplies, everything they had come for. Can you drive this thing? Kane asked, wiping blood from his cheek. Rourke smirked, already working at the controls. Drive? No. Fly? Absolutely. The engines roared to life. Darius turned back to the battlefield. The snow was stained red. Bodies littered the ground. Their bodies. The Zirac's bodies. Blood on the snow. soaking into the ice, marking the beginning of something the aliens would come to fear. He climbed aboard, gripping the rail as the transport lifted into the air. The war wasn't over. Not even close. But tonight, the Zirac had learned a lesson. Earth wasn't finished, and its soldiers weren't broken. Not anymore. The silence before the strike was always the same. A tense, heavy pause filled with the knowledge that death waited just beyond the next breath. Darius sat in the cockpit of the captured Zirac dropship, his hands steady on the control panel, his gaze fixed on the sprawling enemy facility below. It stretched across the frozen landscape like a steel parasite, its towers jutting into the stormy sky, floodlights sweeping the ice for threats that had already slipped past their defenses. Kane leaned against the bulkhead, checking his rifle with practiced ease. "They don't know we're coming," he muttered. "That's their first mistake." Rourke smirked from the co-pilot seat. Their second mistake was thinking Earth was theirs to keep. Ortega's voice came through the comm, "All teams in position. On your go, Commander." Darius inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle into his bones. This wasn't just another strike. This was a message. The Zirac thought they could burn Earth and walk away unchallenged. They had underestimated the fire they had ignited in its survivors. Go! The dropship's thrusters roared, the stolen vessel diving toward the enemy base with lethal intent. As soon as they cleared the outer perimeter, the alarms began wailing, a shrill, panicked sound that filled the air. Searchlights snapped upward, but it was too late. Rourke brought the ship down hard, slamming onto the main platform as the bay doors burst open. Darius led the charge. They moved like ghosts through the chaos. Silence shots took down the first wave of Zirac sentries before they could even raise their weapons. Ortega and his snipers eliminated the rooftop gunners before the aliens knew where to return fire. Explosions erupted along the outer walls as the other teams breached. The base was a fortress, but tonight it was theirs. Kane went in first, his rifle spitting fire as he cut through the stunned defenders. Blood sprayed across the metal floors. Rourke lobbed a grenade down the hall, the concussive blast tearing a hole in the enemy's desperate line. They pressed forward. Every shot, every kill, was another strike against the invaders who had tried to erase them. A blast door slammed, shut ahead, cutting off their path. Darius didn't hesitate. He slammed his fist against the control panel, opening his comm. "Rourke, I'm on it." The tech specialist dropped his knee, fingers flying across his datapad. Sparks rained as he bypassed the lock, forcing the heavy doors apart. Beyond them, a squad of Zirac elites waited, their armor thicker, their weapons deadlier. They raised their rifles, too late. Darius shot first. His round punched through the lead soldier's visor, sending it crashing to the floor. Kane and Ortega flanked left, laying down suppressive fire as Rourke dove for cover. The hallway became a battleground, plasma bolts searing the air. A Zirac warrior lunged at Darius, energy blade humming. He sidestepped, caught the alien's wrist, and twisted. The blade fell from its grip just before Darius drove his knife into its throat. He ripped it free, letting the body collapse. They pushed forward, relentless. The Zirac began to falter. Fear crept into their movements. They had never expected humans to fight like this, not after what had been done to their planet. The command center loomed ahead. Darius signaled Ortega. The sniper raised his rifle, exhaled, and took the shot. The lead commander's head snapped back, its body crumpling to the floor. The remaining Zirac broke. Panic rippled through their ranks. Some fought, desperate and reckless. Others ran, abandoning their posts. They had seen something tonight, something that shattered the lie they had been told. The humans weren't beaten. They weren't scattered prey. They were warriors. Darius stepped over the commander's corpse, staring at the screen still flashing red with warnings. He activated his comm. "All teams fall back. We've sent our message." Rourke set the charges. Ortega covered their retreat. Kane grinned as he pulled the pin on one last grenade, tossing it over his shoulder as they sprinted for the dropship. They were airborne when the first explosion rocked the base. Fire consumed the command center, spreading fast, swallowing the Zirak's stronghold in a storm of destruction. Darius watched from the cockpit as the enemy fortress crumbled. Their retaliation had begun. The Zirak had come to Earth thinking they had won. Now they understood fear. The Zirak fleet hung in low orbit, their warships casting long shadows over the broken remains of Earth cities. They had come expecting submission. What they found was something else entirely. Darius adjusted the targeting scope of his rail rifle, his breath steady despite the cold biting through his gear. Around him, his men waited in perfect silence, nestled among the ruins of what had once been a sprawling metropolis. The Zirak patrol below moved in tight formation, their alien chatter distorted through the comms. They weren't just searching, they were afraid. Kane crouched beside him, tightening his grip on his rifle. "They're nervous," he muttered. "They should be," Darius replied. He gave the signal. The first shot tore through the Zirak captain's skull before the rest even realized they were under attack. Ortega's sniper rifle cracked again, dropping another before the squad could react. Then the ambush erupted. Darius leapt from cover, his rifle spitting fire. Kane went in hard, a blade in one hand, a pistol in the other, carving through the stunned Zirak. The aliens fought back, their plasma weapons lighting up the ruins, but the humans were faster, deadlier. Within seconds, it was over. Rourke moved in, scavenging their comm devices for intel. "They're pulling back to the fortress in New Berlin," he reported. "Massive force gathering. This isn't a search party. It's preparation for a last stand." Darius wiped the blood from his blade, nodding. "Then we hit them first." The humans had fought in shadows, striking from ruins, turning the land into a weapon. But now, it was time for something bigger, something louder. 3 days later, they stood on the outskirts of New Berlin, the last great Zirak stronghold. Towers of steel and alien architecture loomed against the ashen sky. A force of thousands gathered within, an army meant to crush the last remnants of human resistance. Darius watched through binoculars, his expression unreadable. Around him, his soldiers checked their weapons, finalizing preparations. Kane lit a cigarette, took a slow drag. "You sure about this?" Darius lowered the binoculars. "We burn them out." Rourke's hands flew over the detonator panel. Across the city, explosives lay in wait beneath key structures buried deep beneath Zirak defenses. The aliens had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to endure. They had built their war machine atop Earth's bones, and now those bones would break them. Darius pressed the trigger. The ground trembled. Explosions ripped through the city's foundation, sending shockwaves of destruction through Zirak ranks. Towers collapsed in a cascade of fire and steel, entire sectors crumbling beneath their own weight. Then the charge began. Darius led the assault, his soldiers pouring into the burning city, striking hard, fast. Ortega's team took the rooftops, snipers eliminating high-value targets with lethal precision. Kane and the frontliners fought through the streets, turning every alley into a death trap for the retreating Zirak. The aliens fought back with desperation, but desperation wasn't enough. This was no longer a war of conquest. This was survival. Plasma fire seared past Darius as he moved through the wreckage, his rifle an extension of his fury. The Zirak commander loomed ahead, taller, clad in ornate battle armor, a leader who had once mocked humanity's struggle. Darius closed the distance. The commander swung a massive blade, but Darius ducked, drove his knife deep between its armor plates. The alien shuddered, its strength failing, its war ending. As it collapsed, the battle around them faded. The Zirak forces were breaking. Some fought to the last breath, others fled into the burning ruins, but none could escape what had come for them. By nightfall, it was over. Darius stood atop the wreckage of the fortress, looking down at the battlefield below. Humanity had been written off as defeated, extinct. But now, the Zirak knew the truth. The war they had started was never the war they expected, and it was far from over.